Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, my ongoing series where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way up to 2022 and review them. And this one is actually one of my favorites. It's another historical one, and thankfully, and this is a rarity in this season in particular, thankfully it is not a missing episode. All 4 parts of the serial are fully intact, and it's, of course, the Gunfighters. Now, first things first, elephant in the room, how the last episode ended. The final episode of The Celestial Toymaker, the Doctor takes a few candies and is in severe pain. And we're sort of led to believe that he's been poisoned by those candies that he got from one of the Celestial Toymaker's henchmen, only to then discover that, no, he just has a massive toothache because he bit down on some really hard candy. Okay, cool! Great funny joke on that, on the part of the showrunners. Anyways, moving on to the first episode of this serial, the TARDIS just happens to land in Tombstone around the time of Doc Holliday and the OK Corral. Now, full disclosure, not an American, not fully versed in the history of Tombstone, and a bit of a confession to make. Haven't actually watched the movie. So, this story, when I watched it for the first time several years ago, I'm not going to give away the actual number, but when I watched it for the first time, that was kind of my introduction to that whole story. And that is really the only version of that story that I know. A version of the story that just happens to have a time traveler from another planet in a police box. Now, moving on from those semantics aside, I really like this episode. This is fun. This is funny. And you know what? This is how you do a proper historical story in the William Hartnell era. Not the massacre of whatever the hell that was. Get that out of your brain immediately. This is how you do a proper historical. Yeah, the subject matter, probably not suited for young viewers, but the way they tell the story and how they make it fun is. And this really does fit within the framework of Doctor Who. And I like it. And you know what? I gotta wonder if this may have something to do with the new producer. Since considering that back in those days the show didn't really have much of a showrunner the way that Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, and Chris Chibnall have been for the modern series, but a sort of pseudo showrunner, or rather the equivalent of what a showrunner would be in modern times. Obviously, it started with Verity Lambert, then moved on to John Wiles, who, while he did deliver the Dalek Master Plan, he also gave us the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, one of my least favorite episodes of Doctor Who. However, starting from the Celestial Toymaker and onwards, we got a brand new producer in Ines Lloyd, who actually stayed on all the way through the Patrick Troughton era. But we're not quite there yet. We're here to talk about the Gunfighters, and you can really tell the difference between a historical story, a 4-part historical, told through the eyes of producer John Wiles, or Wiles, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name, as opposed to the same type of story being told by producer Ines Lloyd. Now, I'm not exactly 100% sure how much involvement did either of those two producers have with the actual making of those stories. I'm just letting you know there's a significant change in quality since Ines Lloyd joined the team. A significant change in quality for the better. Now, once we got those semantics out of the way as well, it's a really fun story. I mean, there really isn't much to tell. I mean, like I said earlier, it's the story of Tombstone with Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and the Clayton brothers. All the different characters are there from the story that you're either familiar with from history or from the movies, except, it's told in a Doctor Who setting. I love the way the Doctor himself interacts with this world. Again, the pacifist refusing to use guns, unless he has to sometimes. Just having to navigate his way through the Wild Wild West during one of the most infamous gunfights of all time. And first of all, I'll just say this, I love how Wyatt Earp immediately calls Steven on his BS, because Steven shows up wearing a ridiculous cowboy outfit, thinking that he's a proper cowboy, and then, like, 5 seconds later, Wyatt Earp shows up a couple of seconds later and like, you're gonna get shot looking like that, you idiot. And I'm not 100% sure what exactly he said, but I just love the way they address the fact that, yeah, this ain't the Wild West gunslinging world that you're familiar with. This is the actual real historical place. Sort of similar to how Marty McFly in Back to the Future dressed up all crazy like when he actually showed up in the actual Wild West. Things were significantly different than he expected. Yeah, that's the sort of things that happen in history sometimes. Some people remember it in a completely different way than what it actually was. But yeah, that little bit of dissing Steven aside, let's move on to the next bit of dissing Steven, because as I have mentioned repeatedly on this series, I do not like this character one bit, and I would even go double for Dodo. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't apologize. I don't mean to disrespect Peter Purves or Jackie Lane. It's just the way the characters were written. They never really clicked for me. Case in point, I'm probably not the only one who thought that way, because as soon as Ines Lloyd showed up, those characters were almost immediately kind of swept under the rug and never actually came back to the show again, aside from some Big Finish stuff. Maybe I'm not the only one in the world who shares that opinion, but Steven Taylor continues to prove his uselessness by being a complete bumbling fool in front of the Clayton brothers, sort of letting slip some information about the Doctor that he shouldn't have said, and then him and Dodo get into some trouble at the end of the first episode, and that's really how the first episode ends, with him and Dodo being forced to entertain the Clayton brothers singing the ballad of The Last Chance Saloon, which, by the way, the Last Chance Saloon song that's playing all throughout the different parts of the episode, I loved that. I wish more episodes of Doctor Who would do something like that, and this is, again, going back to a point that I've made several different times before, even as far back as the most recent episode, The Celestial Toymaker, the gimmicks of the episode, doing these gimmicks, like having the riddles being just popping up at the end of each episode of The Celestial Toymaker, and right here, in this episode, every scene sort of almost being accompanied by some music, the song, the ballad of The Last Chance Saloon, which kinda, sorta, almost make this episode a musical, in a way, a Western musical, and you know what? I'm all here for it. I love that. I wish more episodes of Doctor Who would do that. Unfortunately, since the Hartnell era, that trend has seemed to have faded away into obscurity, and that's really unfortunate, in my opinion. But what are you gonna do? First of all, as far as historical characters, again, not 100% caught up on all the historical significance of some of these people, but I did like the portrayal of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and the Clayton brothers, and even Johnny Ringo and Kate. I loved the portrayal of all these characters. Just, again, don't really have that much connection with them because I don't 100% know the story. But I do love the whole switcheroo. The Doctor is mistaken for being Doc Holliday, and Doc Holliday gives him a gun, so the Clayton brothers shoot him, thinking that he's the actual Doc Holliday. I like these sort of identity swap stories. And again, not to continuously hammer the point home and continue to beat a dead horse past its expiration date, but this is how you do an identity swap story in a historical Doctor Who episode, not with the massacre. I'm sorry I keep going back into that episode, but it's just, the comparisons between the two are just astronomical. In any case, Johnny Ringo as a villain, really, really good. I actually do legitimately feel sorry for Charlie. And I'm really a fan of the portrayal of Doc Holliday in this episode, where he's kind of a villain, but not really. I mean, he does have his own motives. He's certainly not a good guy, but he's also not a bad guy. I mean, he could have just shot Dodo at any given moment, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to keep her safe and make sure she eventually gets back to the doctor and Steven. So yeah, he's not entirely a bad guy, but I mean, he's also not entirely a good guy. And I love the whole gray area that character was treading all throughout the story, and just the subplot of kidnapping Dodo. And again, this isn't me trashing on the character again. As a story beat, I thought it worked really, really well. And I liked all the moments with the doctor and the marshal and the sheriff. Then they sort of temporarily deputized the doctor. I wonder if that's ever going to come up again in the show. Who knows? But overall, really, really fun story. The massive gunfight at the end was really, really good. Really well done. I love the choreography. I wonder if they actually used real guns during that whole fight. That's something that I might be interested to look into. Hold on. Yeah, save that for later. But overall, really good action. Lots of fun comedy. And of course, like I said, the music. And yeah, it's a really, really fun story with one of my favorite doctors and two of my least favorite companions. So overall, as a complete package, really, really fun episode. Not really much else to say. I like the sets, love the costumes, and really some really good acting and really good portrayal of historical characters. Unfortunately, I'm just thinking of which episode comes up after this, and I'm already dreading having to review it. But I'll burn that bridge when I'll get to it. So let me know what you thought about the episode The Gunfighters. I really, really like it. It's one of my favorite historical it's one of my favorite historical episodes from Doctor Who, which I don't really get to say that a lot about some of the straight-up historical stories. Like some of my favorites are Marco Polo, the Romans, and now this. And I'm not really sure if there's any other full-on straight historical, as in like actual historical events, not just being set in the past somewhere. I don't think there are other historical episodes from that era of Doctor Who that really speak to me, but we got several more episodes to talk about, so maybe I'll find some of them. So thank you for watching, and I was attempting to try to sing a verse from the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon, but I don't want people coming up with pitchforks and torches into my house. So I'll just wrap this up by saying goodbye. Hi there! Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.